This conference will now be recorded.
It's 11. So before starting, मैं आप सभी से सर का परिचय करा दूं। इससे पहले आप लोगों ने बहुत लोगों से बात की होगी और मैंने भी बहुत लोगों से आपकी मीट को चर्चा इस तरह की कराई। लेकिन आज हमारे बीच में जो है उनके बारे में ये कहना चाहिए कि आधुनिक भारत में और कम से कम 21st सेंचुरी में कुछ ऐसे ब्यूरोक्रेट्स जिन्होंने अपने काम से और बिना कोई बहुत ऐसा, अगर आप सामान्य व्यक्ति हैं तो शायद आपको वो भी नहीं पता चलेगा, लेकिन जिनका काम इतना बड़ा है कि जिन्होंने एक अपने पीछे एक बहुत बड़ी लेगेसी छोड़ी है। सभी लोग जो सिविल सेवा की तैयारियां कर रहे हैं, सभी लोग जो सिविल सेवक बन रहे हैं, ऐसे हर एक व्यक्ति के लिए प्रेरणा स्रोत और कैसे काम करना चाहिए, कैसे अपनी इंटीग्रिटी को हाईएस्ट फॉर्म में मेंटेन करना चाहिए, ऐसे श्री अनिल स्वरूप जी हमारे बीच में है। सर का परिचय देना तो मतलब बहुत ऐसे मेरे लिए बहुत विचित्र बात होगी। 38 साल की सेवा सर की। सर जब लबासना से पास हुए तो वहां पर बेस्ट ऑफिसर ट्रेनी का अवार्ड, उसके बाद सबसे महत्वपूर्ण चीज की एक ऐसी चीज जिसने पूरे देश में एक पूरे देश को हिला दिया था, कोल स्कैम जब हुआ, उसके बाद जो कोल ब्लॉक आवंटन हुए और उसमें जो ट्रांसपेरेंट तरीके से पूरी ऑप्शंस हुई, उसको सर के देखरेख में ही, जब सर कोल सेक्रेटरी थे तो उसे कराया गया। उसके अलावा एक बहुत बड़ी और जिस पर मैं अभी सवाल भी सर से आगे पूछूंगा, प्रोजेक्ट मॉनिटरिंग ग्रुप। इस देश की जो एक बहुत बड़ी समस्या थी कि हमारे प्रोजेक्ट्स वगैरह जो है वो कई बार फंस जाया करते थे जिससे कॉस्ट बढ़ती थी। सर प्रोजेक्ट मॉनिटरिंग ग्रुप को भी हेड करते रहे। सर कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरीट में असिस्टेंट सेक्रेटरी रहे, उस दौरान सर ने बहुत सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स को हेड किया और उसके अलावा देश के एजुकेशन सेक्रेटरी के रूप में सर ने योगदान दिया है। तो ऐसे सबसे पहले तो सर का धन्यवाद कि हम लोगों को सर ने मार्गदर्शन देने के लिए अपना बहुमूल्य समय निकाला। और इससे पहले कि मैं आगे सर से सवाल करूं, मैं चाहूंगा कि सर कुछ एक थोड़ा सा हम लोगों को अपने बारे में बताएं और थोड़ा मार्गदर्शन करें और फिर मैं सवालों से शुरू करूंगा।
Thank you very much for those kind words. It's a pleasure to be amidst you all. And initially, some of you were not coming on screen, but you all look bright and sprightly and keep smiling. You know, that's the best thing that you can do with your lips, no matter what the circumstances are. So I'm assuming that many of you are aspiring to become civil servants or want to do well in life. But as you go along in life, it's not a question of what you achieve in the beginning, that is in terms of the service that you have. What is important is that you have that sense of satisfaction as you go along. That's the most critical part. You know, as was mentioned, I spent 37 years in the Indian Administrative Service, and before that 1 year in the Indian Police Service. I came across a large number of officers who had wanted to become civil servants. They became civil servants and made life mess for themselves as well as for others. So merely getting into civil service is not the end of the day. Yes, it's a very important location in life. It's an aspiration that number of you would be having and many people have. It's nice to aspire to become a civil servant because it can be an extremely, extremely satisfying vocation. You know, when I wrote my book, Not Just a Civil Servant, in the first chapter of that book, I write that I became a civil servant or an IAS officer because my father wanted me to become an IAS officer. I was in a way fulfilling the dream of my father, who had desired that I should become an IAS officer. I'm sure he must have had very good reasons to desire that. But at the end of the day, after having put in 38 years as a civil servant, I write in the last chapter of my book that if I were to be born again, I would like to be an IAS officer all over. For the simple reason that I can't visualize any other service in the world which can provide me opportunities to do good to such people who are helpless, who have nobody to look up to, and you can actually provide them a lot of succor. So in that sense, the civil services provide enormous opportunity to do good to others. Now, I interact with a large number of aspirants almost every day. And some of them are candid enough, honest enough to admit that they are joining the civil service for the robe, for the power and the prestige that it has. No harm. We are all human beings. There's no harm in aspiring for comforts, for power, but don't be disillusioned. Don't have this illusion that civil service is all power and prestige. It is not. Yes, there is a lot of respect to those or for those that do well, that do good, but there are as many as we know that they're doing good are hated because they flaunt their power, they flaunt their prestige. So the choice would be yours when you join the civil service. And this is not merely of civil service, as I said earlier. In life, you have to look for happiness, for sense of satisfaction. And that can come not merely in civil service, it can come otherwise also. And for that, you have to evolve as an individual to be reckoned with. You know, in my second book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, I mentioned that in 38 years of my career, I never ever went to a politician for any favor whatsoever. And I was very happy at that. It is not necessary to do that. Some of us do that. Why? Because if you evolve as an individual to be reckoned with, then there's a lot of respect for you. And the true worth of a civil servant gets determined after he retires, because then you are yourself, you are an individual. You're not sitting on a chair to be respected. Your respect is born out of the true respect that people have for you and not otherwise. Hence, you have to evolve as an individual to be reckoned with. And I conclude Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant by this couplet. खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या. So each of you can evolve as an individual to be reckoned with. Irrespective of whether you get into the civil service or not is not so important as evolving as an individual to be reckoned with. The next question is, how do I evolve as an individual to be reckoned with? What do I do? What should I do? You know, most of us lack that confidence. I mean, yesterday I was interacting with a large set of aspirants and they say, sir, confidence nahi aata. Dar laga rehta hai. Ye kyun hota hai? Why does it happen? Why do you lack confidence? The reasons are very simple. Every human being goes through that. I also went through that. And whatever I'm telling you today is not gyan. It's experience that I experienced myself through my own career, my own life. And there were occasions when I felt absolutely down and out. Each one of us on occasions feels down. I can't think of any individual on this earth who hasn't had this feeling of being down. He may not express it in public, but everyone does. So how do you get over those phases of depression? How do you get over those phases when you're not feeling up to it? And if you can't do that, then to become a person to be reckoned with will be very difficult. So the first point that you should remember is that there's nobody on this earth who hasn't committed a mistake. There's nobody on this earth who hasn't failed at some point in time. So failure should not deter you from doing what you want to do. Much of the lack of confidence comes from your apprehension कि इसमें गड़बड़ तो नहीं हो जाएगा, मैं गलत तो नहीं बोल दूंगी, अरे मालूम नहीं वो क्या सोचेगा. You know, that is the fear that actually takes away from your confidence. Once you start believing that every individual has committed a mistake or has had a failure. You know, I narrate an incident from my own life in my first book, where I narrate that when I passed class 12, I had physics, chemistry, maths as my paper. And then I switched over to humanities. But my expression and communication skills were very poor. I could barely write 5 sentences in English or Hindi. So I started working on it and gradually I improved. I'm not going to the details of how you can improve your communication skills, but I did. And then I became a reasonably good debater to represent my university. And I was representing my hostel at a national cultural festival at IIT Kanpur, where a debating competition was to take place. I was one of the 2 debaters there. But one day before the debating competition, there was also a music competition. So I thought I was a reasonably good singer. I'm sure each one of you would think that each one of you can sing at different places. Some sing in the bathroom, some in the bedroom, some outside, you know, but various stages. I also thought that I was a very good singer. I had not practiced at all. I decided to participate in the music competition one day before the debating competition. As luck would have it, I picked up the wrong note and 1,000-strong students like you booed me out within 15 seconds of the song because I was not singing the correct notes. So when I came out, I was totally shattered. I had failed. And the mistake that I had committed was that I had not prepared for that event, and I thought I'll go and do it. So I was so shattered that I refused to participate in the debate on the following day. One of the seniors came and told me that what you've done was wrong because you're not prepared and you participated. Why should that deter you from doing something for which you have practiced and that's your forte? Music was not your forte. You wrongly participated in that. Admit that as a mistake. In future, you've got to participate, prepare for it. But that should not, sometimes we live in the past. These days in our country also, since we can't do anything in the present, we keep digging. One shivling here, one shivling there, and we keep digging. And we keep diverting attentions of people in the past. Now, I'm convinced that you can't change the past. I don't know how many of you can change your past. The past is done and dusted. You may interpret it the way you want to interpret it, but you can't. Can anybody say, please shake your head in yes or no, whether you can change your past? Can anyone change his past? Pooja? Tanya? Can you change your past? Just nod your head if yes or no. I'd like to understand from you whether you can change your past. Tanya, are you listening to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you change your past, Tanya?
Yes.
You can change your past. So I would like to, or all of us like to be enlightened in the next couple of minutes कि आप अपने पूर्व जो बीत गया है उसको कैसे परिवर्तित करेंगे? How do you change your past? Tanya, we await your answer.
इन्होंने सवाल शायद सही से सुना नहीं. तान्या सर का सवाल था, कैन यू चेंज योर पास्ट? तुमने हाँ बोल दिया.
सर पास्ट चेंज नहीं हो सकता.
Okay, so I've yet to come across somebody who may say that he may change the past, who can change the past. What you can do is, you don't even know what is the future. What you can do is the present, the moment. So this is what my senior told me on that day. कि वो जो बीती ताही बिसार दे आगे की सुधले वो तो हो गया जो होना. Nothing can be done about it. Why don't you focus on your present, on what you got to do now? So next day, I went for the debating competition, and the moment my name was announced, everyone started shouting Gayak aa gaya, because the previous day I had failed as a singer. So they were ridiculing me. But I went and spoke, and I won the first prize in the national debating competition. Thereafter, I have not looked back. I can talk to any audience anywhere in the world. I've done that. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that each one of us commits mistake. We all have failures, everyone. So don't get cowed down by your failures. Don't feel down about your failures, because it's a very natural occurrence. So I can go on and on this, but since I've already spoken for 10 minutes, the bottom line that I'm suggesting to all youngsters sitting here is that you should be able to evolve as an individual. And there are many ways in which you can do that. Evolve as an individual, grow as a confident individual. Whether you make it to the civil service or not is not so material if you live happily in life. Getting into civil service can provide you an opportunity or opportunities to feel happy about what you do. And it provides enormous opportunities, but that's not the end of the world. There are many other ways in which you can keep yourself happy. So I'll stop here. I would rather answer your questions than go on talking myself, because talking is the easiest thing to do. Walking is difficult. Now, I'm so glad many of you have opened your videos, but I'm surprised that some of you that had opened the videos have gone off. This switched it off. Janvi being one of them. Must have been good reason for, okay, she's back. So that lovely background and foreground is still there. Others, I would again request them to open the videos. Sahil, Nitisha, Adarsh, Diya, Yogita, Medhavi, Sahil, Sparsh, Manav, and some are waiting to enter. Okay.
So before we go to the questions from the audience, there are some common questions, because after knowing about you and after reading about you, sir, everybody has a few common questions, which I am posing from their behalf. Everybody was so curious about the process after the coal block scam, and when you were at the helm, when the entire auction for coal block happened. So, sir, we would like to know how did that went? What are the core public service values that we need when we are doing such a humongous task, which will affect country's fiscal health? So, what is the role of rule of law? What is the role of integrity? What is the role of basically, the question has two components. First was the public service values that are needed in such situation, and second was the use of technology to pass these kind of challenges. So these are two questions.
Okay, so when I was posted as coal secretary, I was not fully conversant with the coal sector. So I rang up a friend of mine and asked him, "Yaar, ye sector kaisa hai?" So instead of answering my question, he asked me a question. Gangs of Wasseypur dekhi hai kya? You know, that actually explained to me what the sector was all about. And it prepared me for the turmoil that was there in the sector. I remember that when I walked into the room of Coal Secretary Government of India, it was a lovely room, huge, lovely room. But it felt as if I was walking in a graveyard. Anything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong with the coal sector. CBI was after officers, after files. It was terrible. But you know, given the experience that I had before, I had not faced exactly this situation, but you know, somewhat similar situations, somewhat similar crisis in the past. This was probably the worst of the crisis that I had faced. I was confident that I would be able to do something about it. This brings us the first attribute of a civil servant. If you are not confident about yourself, how will you develop confidence in others? So you have to have a faith in your own abilities and capabilities. That is very, very important for any leader. If you do not have faith in your own capabilities, if you doubt yourself, then how will others have will not have doubt in you? They will have doubt in you if you doubt yourself. So first is have faith in your capabilities. I had put in already 34 years of service, and I had faith that give me whatever situation, I'll try and make the best out of it. I had started believing that I had control over processes. I had enormous control over my own karma, but I didn't know about the result. I didn't care about the result either. I was into processes. So I tried to then understand the cause of the problem in the coal sector. And once having understood the cause of the problem, because this is another important attribute of any individual, when you want to find a solution to any problem, you must go to the bottom of the cause of the problem. Because normally we scratch the surface. So you have to have confidence in your abilities, in your capabilities. Then you should be able to analyze the problem and go to the bottom of that problem, the cause of that problem. And once you do that, you'll be able to start finding answers. Even if you don't find answers, you'll start moving the direction of finding those answers. Because without such an analysis, without an in-depth understanding of the cause of the problem, the chances of finding solutions are very, very, very remote. Then, of course, you must understand that you can't do everything on your own. You know, the job of a leader is to build a team. And how do you build a team? You can build a team only if you can convey your trust. You know, much of the problems that we face today is on account of distrust. If you trust people, then you will be able to delegate powers to them. You'll be able to empower them. That's what I did. I found a team, and an absolutely outstanding team. We worked together. We fought the problems together. We fought the adversities together. We used to take pride in the small successes that we had. Now, this is another attribute that you must have. Everyone thinks that I want to become a civil servant, and his ultimate goal is getting into the civil service, without realizing that in order to get into civil service, you have to have those smaller victories. What are these small victories? You assign yourself कि कल मैं इस chapter को पढ़ूंगी और समझूंगी. At the end of the day, if you read that chapter and understood it, that's a small victory for you. Enjoy that victory. So you have to enjoy the moments that you're in. We are sometimes so worried about the future that we don't enjoy the moments. And if you don't enjoy the journey that you're undertaking, then the chances are that you will not reach your destination. There are better chances of you reaching destination if you enjoy the moments, the small successes. So the another attribute of any individual, and more so of a civil servant, is that they must learn to enjoy the moments and learn to enjoy successes. So when we were doing this coal block auction, we used to celebrate small successes. For example, we came up with a foolproof document, a tender document. We celebrated that. When the first auction happened, it succeeded, we celebrated that. We set up a transparent portal. The day it became active, it's there on my Twitter also. We celebrated it. So we used to celebrate small successes. That gave us confidence to take up the larger task. So you can't take up the larger task of qualifying for the civil service or doing something big without understanding how to do small things. It is those small things that will provide you the stepping stone to reach the top. It's like climbing a mountain. If you keep looking at the top and get overawed by the height that you've climbed, have to climb, you will never be able to climb it. But if you take small steps and enjoy those steps and get the enjoyment out of having traveled 6 steps, 10 steps, then the chances are that you reach the summit easily. So these are some of the attributes. Then of course, for a civil servant, you have to be absolutely purely honest and transparent. It helps. If you have transparency, then no one will attribute malafide to you. You know, we did these coal block auction. No one has pointed a finger. Lakhs of crores were involved. Not a single finger pointed towards us. Why? Because we made it transparent. This brings me to his second question when he talks of technology. Now, till about 10 years ago, technology was not good enough for me to make things transparent. I don't know how many of you are aware. If you read my books, you'll find it there. That at the Cabinet Secretariat, where I was heading the project monitoring group to fast track 1,000 crore and above projects, in the coal ministry, in the human resource development ministry, in all these ministries, we did away with files and papers. There was no file, any paper. Everything was visible to everyone. So once the visibility is there, and this visibility becomes through technology. It is through technology that we digitized all the files, we digitized all the papers, all the decisions were put on a web portal. It is not that we didn't commit mistakes. We did commit mistakes. But those mistakes were discovered almost immediately because of transparency. It was known to the world at large. And secondly, when you are transparent, no one will attribute and say he had his own axe to grind, because you can't be dishonest transparently. This is very clear. Your dishonesty will be caught immediately. So the fact of being transparent gave me that platform through which I could do things. In my entire career, you know, I have a full session on how I use technology through my career, right from the beginning of my career to much later. I'm not a technologist. I can't write a program. I can barely operate this laptop, but I know how to use technology. And technology can be transformational. In fact, even after retirement, I'm engaged with a number of tasks to make life easy for the common man through use of technology. You know, people talk about corruption. Everyone talks about corruption. It's a fashion to talk about corruption without doing much about it. But I am at it. My contention is very clear, and I did that during service also. That if we can eliminate physical interface between common man and government or government officers, and if you can do it everything on the laptop or otherwise through a kiosk, corruption will come down dramatically. And this is being attempted in Haryana. So technology can be a great facilitator, great instrument in reducing corruption phenomenon.
Thanks a lot, sir. One more question that was very common, that was civil servants and upholding rule of law, because these days when we see young civil servants, when they get into this service, at times the tendency is that I can do anything and everything, and that Singham style working, sometimes it's showed. So how rule of law shall shape the civil servants, and what is the importance of rule of law in bureaucracy?
No, rule of law is non-negotiable. Those that act like Singham pay a price at some point in time. I can give you many examples where people going out of the way to do things which are illegal in nature, law catches up with them. You know of so many police officers languishing behind jail. You know of IAS officers languishing behind jail because they thought they could get away with blue murder. No more. They could get away with blue murder maybe 20 years ago. Today, public is much more informed. The social media is very active. So I advise all my colleagues that there is no way that you can get away with violating laws or playing with laws. However, what I keep saying is, a lot of administration happens in the gray area, where the law may be silent, is not clear. There I suggest to my colleagues is, interpret the law in favor of the poor. And if you read my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, I have given instances where I interpreted law in favor of poor. Now, as I keep saying, in administration, everything cannot be written as a part of law. A lot of time you are interpreting the law, and that's the gray area. I have yet to come across a single officer who's been penalized for interpreting the law in favor of the poor. I did that on a number of occasions, and so far I have retired for 4 years now. No one has knocked on my door, no CBI, ED, so far at least, for having helped the poor by interpreting the law in the favor of the poor. All those that have come to grief are those that perhaps interpreted law in the favor of the rich. So you know what, I mean, as I've given in almost 70 chapters of my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, I'm very clear in my mind as to what should be done when. So when officers approach me, and quite a few of them approach me, I'm very clear. I tell them, this is what I would have done in your place. And there is no confusion on that front.
Exactly, sir. Now, coming to this gray area, few of us wanted to understand by an example, when we face a dilemma of rule of law and our personal compassion or our personal commitment to poor, where we cannot uphold rule of law, where there is a choice of either or, and where we at the end of the day feels that this is the reason why I chose to be civil servant. So that dilemma where your personal ethics and professional ethics, they are at loggerheads.
No, there is no dilemma here. I mean, I did have this dilemma in the first few years of my career, but later on I realized very clearly, there is no such thing as conflict between law and personal ethics. Law is law is law. If you join civil service, you have to follow the law, as simple as that. Baaki sab cheez apni jeb mein rakhiye. But by and large, that law is in favor of what your personal ethics is. There would be areas of conflict. If you can interpret the law to favor and keep your personal ethics, do that. But don't violate a law ever for your own personal ethics. What, you know, as I keep saying, I mean, this is not a topic to be discussed today. I have a full session on ethics. You know, personal ethics can vary. I am a former Naxalite. I gave up Naxalism, joined the civil service. And now I have a soft corner for Naxalites. Can I do them a favor as Naxalites? Contrary to a law. I have to implement the law, as simple as that. But, you know, these are very extreme cases, very rare cases. More common cases are the ones that I mentioned in my book. So I'll give you a clear example of where I tried to match my personal ethics with the law. And you can do that. You give me an instance, I tell you, this can be done, this can't be done. So I was Director General Labor Welfare, looking after the welfare of building and the construction workers. We had a corpus of around 7,000 crore. And we were unable to utilize that amount. Now an issue came up whether the brick kiln workers, that is the eet bhatta workers, could be treated as building and the construction workers. Now my personal ethics meant that these are the poorest of the poor lot. We have to somehow find a way to help these people. Now the law was silent here, but strictly speaking, steel manufacturers came to me that we use steel which is directly used in building construction. So our worker should also be a building other construction worker. Brick kiln workers manufacture bricks. They are not involved in construction. They're manufacturing something which I use. Now here I use my interpretation and I took a view that brick kiln workers should be treated as building and construction workers. A strict interpretation may be to the contrary. There was on the file, it was said, you can't treat them as building and construction workers because they don't work in building and construction. They produce something which is used. And the same logic would apply to steel workers. Here I explained, and I explained that in my book, that the value addition that the brick kiln workers brings to mud is more than the value addition that a steel worker brings to steel, because the raw material cost is very high and value addition is very small. Here the cost of raw material is virtually nothing, it's just mud. And the value addition that it brings is many-fold as compared to, I get that justification, and it stands even today. So if the question is, if any one of you give me a specific example, I'll be able to tell you whether it should be done or not. you can actually go according to your personal ethics. But personal ethics could be anything. My personal ethics could be that all persons belonging to a particular community have done injustice to us for centuries, so I should take action against them. That's my personal ethics, my personal value system. Some of us have that value system, no? That centuries से एक particular community ने हम लोगों को exploit किया, अब हम उनको ठीक करना चाहिए. So as an administrator, will you do that? The present political dispensation may ask you to do that, but law does not allow you to do that. I would follow the law. So give me any example, I'll tell you. I'm very clear in my mind. My dilemmas, as you will discover in Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, existed only in first 5-10 years of my service. Thereafter, I was clear. Dilemmas existed, but I was clear what I have to do. And I was prepared for the consequences.
Exactly. Shreya, you had some question. Please ask.
Am I audible, sir?
I'm trying to locate you. I can't see you.
Shreya, थोड़ी
Okay, I'll
तेज
just-
बोलना.
No, बोलने के अलावा दिखिए भी आप.
Sorry, sir. I'll just
बिना
turn on
दिखे
my
हम
camera.
Sorry? Yes, Shreya?
Sir, I'll just
There's
turn
something
on my
wrong with-
camera. Actually, my
Just
camera is
turn-
not working right now.
Good. It's always,
I'm so sorry for
sometimes it's very useful. Yes, please go ahead, ask your question.
So my question was that as a leader, as you said, that handling a team becomes very important. But at the same time, there's a fear to maintain your own image. In a team, you yourself might not be, as a leader, you might not be the best one to handle a project, for instance. So how to keep your weaknesses aside at the same time, maintain a level of confidence and focus on the other person's strengths too, because that becomes very important in order to focus on the process, as you said, right?
Shreya, in most of the cases, leader is not the best equipped person as far as expertise is concerned. There's a huge debate going on these days about between generalists and specialists. And I keep saying, you don't have to be good at everything to be a leader. Leadership does not entail doing things better than others. Leadership entails enabling others to do their best. Please understand the subtle difference between the two. So when I took over as coal secretary, I didn't know anything about coal. But I could add value because I knew some other things which the others did not know. For example, when we engaged with Coal India for increasing coal production, I said I cannot produce coal because I had to be the best producer in coal to become coal secretary as per your understanding. I didn't understand coal, leave alone producing coal. But I could bring some more value to coal production. How? Coal production entails acquisition of land, which in turn entails interaction with the state governments. And as Secretary Government of India, I was in a better position to interact with the state governments and facilitate acquisition of land, which could then be used for coal production. So I was adding value in a different context. A leader adds value not necessarily in the domain in which there are experts or other team members. A leader brings additional value to what is already happening by managing the environment, because environment management is very, very important. It's not merely the task itself. Enabling. So, for example, I did not allow any politician to interfere with the functioning of Coal India. Now, that had nothing to do directly with coal production, but I was creating an environment where Coal India people could sit down and do their job properly. So, leader brings in additional value. It is not the task which is already being done by its members. So, it's a question of adding value. And value can be added in a number of ways as a leader. You don't have to necessarily do what the team members are doing, because your confidence is not out of doing job better than what they're doing. Most of my officers who worked with me when I was coal secretary are probably brighter, brilliant, and better than me. One of them is Home Secretary, Government of India right now. The other is the Additional Chief Secretary, Jammu and Kashmir. Outstanding officers. They may be better than me, but I brought in some additional value, and that made me a leader.
Thank you so much.
And another thing, just you can't be invisible and be a leader. You have to be visible. You can't remain behind a curtain. You can never be a leader if you're behind a curtain. You get your videos going. First thing that you got to do it if you want to impress somebody with what you are saying or what you're doing, because people want you to be seen. And I'm saying that metaphorically and factually. You have to prepare yourself to an extent that today there was an interactive session with Mr. Anil Swarup. Since I'm going to learn about leadership, I'll see my camera is working. That's the preparatory work which a leader would do before coming and talking to anybody else if you want to become a good leader. So I'm telling that to you because you asked a question of leadership. You can't hide behind a curtain and become a leader. And a leader prepares well in advance before communicating with others. So let that be a lesson for you.
Shreya, let that be a lesson. So,
Sorry, sir.
Lipika, your question.
You know, before you ask, let me just a moment, Lipika. You know, one thing that a leader has to do, be available to his team member at any time, any place. You know, and my entire team, right through my career, had the right to call me at any time, day or night. I was available to them. You create confidence if you are available. You know, some people feel that you have to keep a distance from the team. No. My understanding of leadership was be available with your faults, with your mistakes. You don't have to hide your mistakes. As I said in the beginning, no one is perfect. I had my problems. I never hid them. You know, it's like an injury. If you want to treat an injury, you have to first accept the fact of that injury, then apply medicine and give it free air. If you hide it, the chances that the injury will become worse. Yes, Lipika, please go ahead.
So, am I audible?
Yes, you are. You can be slightly louder if you can. Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah, certainly better. Now I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. So my question was, when there is some kind of political pressure from, like, for example, in case of the coal block scam, how do we actually deal with that kind of pressure when all the political parties and everybody is involved? How does a bureaucrat and specifically a civil servant deal with that kind of pressure?
I would suggest, Lipika, I mean, I'll try and answer that question, but you read Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant and you'll understand what I'm saying. For a deeper understanding, because you raise a very pertinent point, which almost everyone asks me. How do you handle political pressure? As if political pressure is such a big hawa that you won't do anything. I mean, I held the most sensitive assignments that you can think of. And I never felt the pressure of a politician. You know why? Because I was clear in my mind. You know, it is natural for a politician to put pressure on you. It's very natural. That's his job. But it's not natural for me to feel pressured. That's my job. You know, I'm digressing a bit. If you understand Hindi, there is a couplet by Ghalib in Urdu. Umr bhar yahi bhool karta raha Ghalib, dhool chehre pe thi aina malta. So we find faults with politicians. I keep telling my colleagues, yaar, politician jo hai wo to hai. He is what he is. He'll put pressure on you. But whether you feel pressured or not is dependent on you, not on the politician. So how do you do that? If you have clarity of thought in your mind, and if your value system is clear, then you will not have problem. So if a politician is putting pressure on me to do something which is illegal, I'll say no to him. Straight. Very politely, I'll say no to him. Initially, there was some problem that I faced, but gradually everyone knew ये गलत काम नहीं करेगा. तो गलत काम कहते ही नहीं थे मुझसे. It depends on your reputation, how you evolve. So that is one. Second, if he tells me something which is legal, then I will do it immediately. Why? Because I want to convey an impression that I will do your right job immediately and there to serve you. But I will not do anything illegal. The problem comes in the area in between, the gray area, where it is not clear whether it is illegal or not, where interpretations are involved. There, I will try and examine it with a positive frame of mind to do that work first. You know, instead of, I know of so many IAS officers who say that I have been transferred 48 times. What nonsense. You are transferred 48 times because you think you are the only honest man going around and the rest of the world is dishonest. It is a wrong way of looking at things. You know, they become public heroes because they are being transferred so many times. My job is not to get transferred. My job is to remain there and do some work. So then I should try and do whatever the politician is telling me to do if it is not illegal. And if I have to do something which is neither legal nor illegal, then I will work out a principle, set of principles on file, on which if someone else comes to me with a similar request, I do it for him. So I have a positive thinking of helping people, including politicians. वो मेरा दुश्मन है क्या politician? You know, initially in my service, I thought all politicians are rascals. My 4th book will be about politicians, actually. I'm working on it already. On how do you handle politicians? You know, politicians are what they are. You know, they have to contest elections every 5 years. We must understand the limitations. We can't keep cursing them. Sure enough, if he tells me anything wrong to do, I will not do. But wrong and right, if there is subjectivity in it, I have to think over it. But if it's contrary to law, I will not do it. If it is as per law, I do it immediately, because then I develop a reputation कि सही काम बिल्कुल ठीक कर देता है. Why do you think I got the best of assignments during my career without even having gone to any politician? Because honesty alone is not enough. You have to be honest, but you have to be efficient. You have to appear as a person who does the right thing and when asked to do right thing. In the gray area, you have to evolve principles. You have to explain. You know, in my entire career, if I have not calculated it, but broadly speaking, I was able to convince the politician to my point of view in almost 90% of cases. There were 10% cases, and these are gray areas, because wrong I won't do anything. In 10% cases, he overruled me. Fair enough, it's a democracy. After all, he's the final man. I'll go with him, though I disagree with him. We talked about personal ethics. Maybe it was against my personal ethics. So be it. मैंने दुनिया को change करनी. You know, some of us are revolutionaries. I tell them, यार झाड़ू उठाओ, political party join करो, don't join civil service. If you're joining civil service, you are getting into a particular discipline, and you have to follow that discipline. Lipika, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you.
Sir, one question was from Abhijit. She's a mother and she cannot ask question herself right now. Her baby is there. So her question was, because India's energy majorly depends on coal, but now as India is moving towards renewable energy, how do we see in the future of coal and its industry?
Next 20 years, we'll have to live with coal. After that, I don't know. Renewable energy will continue to help. But, you know, look at the component of renewable energy in entire power consumption. It is not even 20%. And I don't see it increasing much, because there are huge issues entailed in it. So for at least next 20 years, we'll have to live with coal, good, bad, or ugly.
Exactly. She's saying thank you.
Wonderful, Shreya. Wonderful. I'm so glad you finally shown up. Thank you.
Yeah, I joined in. I joined in with some other device.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
So another question was regarding project monitoring group. What was your experience at project monitoring group, and what took so long? Why it took us so long as a country to start this basic accountability mechanism, and that every Indian should have gotten like before?
It would be difficult for me to answer why it didn't happen earlier. There could be many reasons, but I can tell you what happened. And I am a great believer that that formulation which we brought in the project monitoring group can be a game changer. So what did we do? We did was very simple. I was tasked to fast track projects that were of value of each one of them, a value of more than 1,000 crore. I didn't even know what that number meant at that point in time. But at that point in time, there were scams broking left, right, and center. So no civil servant wanted to take a decision on the file, because they felt that if they took a decision, they will be called to question at some point in time. And that is when this project monitoring group was set up. Now, fortunately, it worked well. Why did it work well? We set up a portal wherein any industry having an investment of more than 1,000 crore could go to that portal, register itself, and indicate the problem that they had along with the name of the ministry where the problem was. Now, this problem automatically flowed to the designated joint secretary of that ministry. And he was mandated to put his comment on the portal. No file, no paper, everything transparent, moving on the portal. And then I used to have tripartite discussions. I used to call the industry, I call the entrepreneur. Minutes of that meeting were recorded directly onto the portal. Again, no file, no paper. And what did I do? I used to ask them to take a decision, not in favor of the industry. I used to tell them, take decision. If you want to reject it, but don't sit on the file. If you are rejecting it, give a reason for rejection so that if they have to go on appeal, they can go. Now, this in itself resulted in clearance of projects worth 5 lakh crores in 15 months. Unprecedented in the history of this country. People ask me, how did it happen? It happened because no matter how inefficient I am, to the public, I'd like to appear to be efficient. In this particular case, everyone got to know who's sitting on which file for how many hours, how many minutes, how many seconds. I don't know whether you're aware, there is a chapter in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, where I talk about a particular tax in the name of a cabinet minister who had to resign because she was sitting on files worth more than 50,000 crores. So transparency brought in transparency through use of technology, brought in that responsibility that ultimately led to decision making in the government. I used that same logic when I became coal secretary, where we set up the coal project monitoring portal to fast track coal related projects. I was very glad to learn day before yesterday when I read in a newspaper that the coal ministry plans to revive that portal to fast track coal projects. So I agree with you. We have technology today to fast track. In fact, I have been tweeting quite a lot that why doesn't the Prime Minister office use that portal to review the private sector projects also?
Exactly, sir. So Shiv has a question.
Sir, good morning.
Morning, Shiv.
So just give me one quick second. So my question was particularly regarding the administration of the LWE affected areas. So I agree that the districts have reduced to 44 over the course of a few years, and we are running schemes such as aspirational districts to help these people. But as you said, let's assume that you did interpret the law in favor of the poor, and you are running schemes and all. You're doing everything right, but in a particular area, the people still refuse to give up arms. As an administrator, as an IAS officer, how do you deal with that kind of a thing?
Have you visited any LWE district?
Absolutely. No, sir.
So yours is an academic question. I have visited them.
Yes, sir.
I visited deep inside Bastar, Sukma. I traveled to those districts. The first step has to be development. Try and wean them over, because much of the reasons, it's a vicious circle. Poor development and they take up arms, and since they take up arms, they can't be development. So to break that, first step has to be development, and I've seen that development happen in Bastar and Sukma. But then it has to be carrot and stick. Those that are not laying arms, they're up against the state, you take action against them as per the law. As simple as that. So whereas you have to be sympathetic to them, try and do whatever little you can. But if someone takes up arms, then arms have to be met with arms. As simple as that.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Sir, one more question on accountability aspect. Currently, in an age of technology, how we see accountability strengthening the democracy of India?
It will automatically do that. No, let's look at the biggest problem that this country faces. I'll tell you, are the delays. People sit on file. Now, once you have transparency through use of technology, the world will get to know who's sitting on which file for how many days, how many hours, how many minutes, how many seconds. Once that happens, the major problem of speed money will be taken care of, because files will start moving and you make people accountable. When I got this done in education ministry, I did not have to take action against anybody. You know why? Because they knew that I knew that they were sitting on a particular file which they didn't sit on the file. We hardly had any application under the Right to Information Act, because everything is available on the portal. So if there were any application, we used to tell them it's there on the portal for everyone to see. Second, I'll give you another very interesting example. When I was coal secretary, one day a CBI officer came to me. He came up with a paper. He said, we raided this officer's house and we found this paper. So then I looked at that paper. I said, I'm a bit surprised. Then I went to the internet and I saw that document was already there on our web portal. I said, it's there on my portal. If it is there in his house, how does this make a difference? He said, sir, but there is confidential written on it. I said, they've got into the habit of putting confidential stuff on every bloody paper, even if there is on web portal. So you can make people accountable if you use technology. I can go on and on how accountability can be done through use of technology, but technology can be a great facilitator in terms of making people accountable.
Exactly, sir. One question, that's my question. That was when you were education secretary, sir. Most of the students know about concurrent list and state list. So I wanted to understand for the better understanding of everybody. So as education secretary, how the governance works when we are handling a topic of state list or the concurrent list. What are the frictions between center and state, and how we get along with this? At times, in modern scenario, we see that political fault lines getting deeper and affecting administration also. So how do we bridge that in matters of state and concurrent list?
You know, I'm glad you raised this question, because if you've been following me on Twitter and if you've been reading my articles, I've been talking about this unfortunate war between center and the states, which is getting worse by the day. And I give you the example of coal. You know, as luck would have it today, coal exists in states that are ruled by other parties, not by the National Democratic Alliance. So coal exists in West Bengal, in Chhattisgarh, in Jharkhand, in Maharashtra, in Odisha, all ruled by non-NDA. It was not so bad when I was coal secretary, but it was pretty bad. West Bengal was still ruled by Mamata Banerjee. Odisha was Naveen Patnaik. So what did I do? How do you handle that? You handle that by not treating states as adversaries. So in 2 years as coal secretary, and that's a record, I did not convene a single meeting with the state governments in Delhi. I used to go down to the states, sit with chief secretary, sit with senior officers, convey a value proposition to them. It's very important. You have to tell the person what is in it for them to do what I want them to do, instead of steamrolling, instead of pushing it down their throat. If you do that, then they will react. If you take them along, they will not react, they will help you. You know, we had record coal production in 14, 15 and 16, 17. Unprecedented coal production, so much so that we were toying with the idea of exporting coal to Bangladesh. How did that happen? By taking states on board. So it's not a question of state list or concurrent list. You know, these lists are for advocates and Supreme Court and High Court to pass judgments on. But such judgments and advocates don't do work on the ground. On the ground, the work gets done by taking people along with you, not treating them as adversaries. Today, the problem is states treat center as an adversary, center treats states as an adversary, and administration and governance are suffering. Could you have ever imagined that a cabinet minister of government of India would be arrested in a state government? Of course, the state minister have been routinely being arrested by the central agencies. What is this going on? I'm not against arrest of people, but it appears to be more of a vendetta than anything else. So if there's going to be a mutual vendetta between center and state, then state list or center list or concurrent list don't matter. What matters is how do you negotiate with your so-called adversary, and why should you treat him as adversary? That's the problem.
Sir, just a supplementary on the same thing. Keeping politics aside, because we as bureaucrats, we are tasked with building the team India. So one of the things that was pretty shocking for me in last 7-8 years, I've been observing things from last 10-12 years, was that we were supposed to, I have tons of people whom I talk to and who are placed in various ministries. So always the feeling was wherever there was political tussle or political vendetta, administrative officers or administration used to act as a bridge. Like a cabinet secretary or a coal secretary will sit down and they will just keep politics aside and they'll get the work done, which is national development agenda. But in last 2, 3, 4 years, we have seen that even chief secretaries or at center level, that administration bridge is not being made, or even if they try to make, they are cowed down by the political pressure. So administration as a bridge between the entire union of India, between entire the nation state, how we build that bridge again, how we build this bridge between chief secretaries, cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, and get the work done that is required for upholding national development agenda?
Okay, here the initiative will have to come from the politicians. Civil servants can travel some distance, but not the entire distance. Take the example of what happened in West Bengal. If the chief minister insists that the chief secretary should not attend the meeting of prime minister, what can the chief secretary do? I will call back webinar. So the initiative of this nature has to come from the politician, because otherwise the civil servant will suffer, as you find in case of every civil servant who tries to put his foot down on that, it suffers from one point or the other. So civil servant is a part of a larger system that we have, and that larger system is run by the politician. So until the politicians wake up to the need of coming to an arrangement with the state governments, I don't think civil servants can play a very important role now, major role now. They had played earlier, but now the war is such that if you try and give a second opinion or different opinion, you are treated as a a lackey of the enemy. So it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. We in this government, I think GST was done with the sagacity of Mr. Arun Jaitley. He did it. He got states on board. Everyone came together. Very complex. But look at farms law. I mean, states should have been consulted to an extent that they should have been brought on board. Look at what is happening coal production. You can't keep fighting with the state governments and get things moving. As I often say, center is a fiction. Physical existence is in the states. So if you try and boss over everyone, then obviously that person will react. Why can't you sit across the table and discuss? But unfortunately, some of us don't have that sagacity to do.
Bilkul, sir. So there was a question of Sachin. Sachin, please ask.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, Sachin.
Sir, the question is, where do you see the coming generation in changing environment where youth is affected by lots of social evils like LWE, employments, and internet, etc.
See, I am an optimist, and I feel that youngsters will play a very, very major role in making India. India will be made not by Make in India, but by youngsters of this country. And I'm very hopeful. I discuss with youngsters every day. I find them very energetic. Sometimes those energies get diverted elsewhere. But if we are able to harness that energy of the youngsters today, very bright people, very well informed. Only thing is, they are in a bit of a hurry. I call this the Maggie culture. Everything, they want everything immediately. They're impatient. Nothing wrong with impatience. But you have to develop, plan, be disciplined. Look at what has happened to the Agnipath or Agniveers that we are talking of today. I mean, we may have a difference opinion with the government, but to burn trains and burn buses, I wonder whether that's going to help anyway. So, there is a bit of impatience that disturbs me, but there is a lot of energy, and that needs to be harnessed. And I think the politician of the day has to play that role, not create additional problems. Unfortunately, I see a lot of politicians creating an additional wedge, additional problem, rather than trying to assuage, feelings, trying to get into an interaction with them. That's a pity, but I am sure we'll overcome all this negativity that we have at this point in time, and we should be able to harness the energy of the youngsters. I think we are out of time. If you want, you can take one more question, and then we'll conclude.
I'll just take one more question, then I'll want you, sir, to enlighten us on your books for 5 minutes at least. So one question was the counter question on the supplementary on the last response of center and state tussle. So the question is, sir, how do we choose between immediate and important? Center bossing around can be a way to uphold immediate development agenda or immediate national priorities when states are not cooperating. So how do we take a call between immediate and important and still have the states on board? Because at times states work as obstructionists.
There is an assumption in this question. The assumption is that the center is right and the states are wrong. That assumption is wrong. That assumption betrays superciliousness. That assumption betrays that center is the only repository of national interest. States are not. You know, it is on account of such assumptions that we have these problems. The center assumes, I have worked in the center as much as I have worked in the states. In center, everyone assumes that they are the only repositories of national interest. What are we talking about? I mean, until the components come along with you, what will you talk? So my suggestion to the person who's asked this question is, look at your assumptions. It is that assumption of center being right and states being wrong that is wrong. Both are equally right and equally wrong. If I boss over somebody, and it applies in the family or otherwise, if you try and boss over everyone, no matter how much you may think that you are the best guy going around, you will have problems. You will have to convince people. I did that as Secretary Coal, no? Why did coal production increase? It's not that ki meri auqat kuch kam ho gayi wahan jaake. I could have said ki I am the repository of national interest. The Chief Secretary will bloody well come here and do what I am telling him to do. It doesn't work that way. In a team, you have to take people along with you. You can't treat them as adversaries, or you can't treat yourself as superior to others. You may be superior, but you don't have to wear it on your sleeve. That question smacks of that superiority complex, which I don't think is correct. That's the real problem.
Exactly, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. I would like you to just talk about your books, just glance over the basic themes of your book so that students can.
No, I don't think I have run out of time. I have some other engagement. I'm getting calls for the next engagement already. So I had allotted one hour for that. If you deem it proper, you can circulate the names of the books to them. Anyone interested can look after that. But I think I'll have to take leave of you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
It was a pleasure interacting with all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.